Shalom, benvinguts a AlHayam, un podcast sobre Israel, Palestina i l'Orient Mitjà.
Som en Paul Sánchez.
I l'Ofer Laszewicki.
Aquest projecte es sosté amb les vostres aportacions. Pots recolzar-nos al nostre perfil de Patreon a partir de 5 euros al mes.
Comencem. Avui tenim un convidat que no necessita gaire presentació, l'Etgar Keret. Keret és un dels escriptors israelians més populars i estimats del nostre temps. Els seus contes, curts, esmolats, sovint absurds i sempre profundament humans, barregen la política amb la vida íntima, l'humor negre amb la tendresa, el caos del carrer de Tel Aviv amb les preguntes que ens fem tots quan apaguem el llum. És un dels autors israelians més traduïts del món. Les seves històries circulen en més de 40 llengües, des del japonès fins a l'islandès i ara, per fi com cal, en català. I dic com cal perquè aquest mes l'editorial La Segona Perifèria ha publicat la traducció al català del seu darrer llibre de contes titulat El blues de la fi del món, traduït ni més ni menys que pel Paul Sánchez, que és el meu col·lega, company, copresentador de AlHayam. Fa un parell d'anys el Paul va traduir també una antologia de relats de Keret amb la mateixa editorial anomenada Les edats de l'home. Així que avui el Paul s'asseu davant de l'autor, que va acabar de traduir una mena de doble vida professional resolta en directe, i ara tots dos li farem preguntes. Quin goig. Parlarem dels contes nous, més foscos que els anteriors. Parlarem d'Israel, després del 7 d'octubre, de què es pot dir i que ja no es pot dir igual. I com sempre amb en Keret parlarem també de coses petites, una escena del carrer, una conversa, un fracàs que ensenya més que un èxit. Així que Etgar, Keret, Shalom, Baruch haba, welcome to AlHayam, benvingut a AlHayam.
Shalom, welcome. No,
Shalom, Etgar.
Okay.
Nice to meet
your
you
Zoom.
in person finally.
It's wonderful for me too.
It's a huge pleasure for us to have you here, Etgar, and also for me to be this bridge between you and Paul, who of course knows a lot and much more than me about your work and about your stories and everything. But we will dive into it now. First, just to begin to break the ice a little bit, if you had to explain who you are through a small scene from your life this week, for example, which one would you choose?
Well, I choose the last one. I just came here, I was a bit late for a podcast because I met my best friend, and my best friend told me he was very happy that he's currently training his chat GPT to write Etgar Keret stories. And he's able to get it better and better at this. And the fantasy of my best friend is that when he'll train the ChatGPT to do it as well as I do, the ChatGPT will write my stories and we'll have more time to hang out.
Okay.
So this is what happened.
Why not the other way around? Why not? Don't you think your friend's going to hang out with ChatGPT and make you write the stories?
I have a feeling that this is what's happening, but he's suppressing it.
This sounds like it could be one of the stories from your latest collection, the one that we're publishing now in Catalan. While I was translating these stories, I referred to it amongst my friends as Dark Keret. Some of the stories in this book are darker than previous collections, or at least more hopeless, more depressing. I'm not going to ask you why, because I suspect the answer is obvious, but rather, how is it?
And depressing.
Sure. But we want to know, how is it that these stories came to be? Like, in what state do you write the stories, and what changes in the way that you draw them out?
So I want to say that, when I was a teenager, I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And one of the parts that really stuck in my mind was the many ways you can use a towel. Apparently, there are like hundreds of ways you can use a towel. You can tie it around your head, and it will protect you from the sun. You can use it as a blanket. If somebody is wounded, you can bandage him. Yeah, and it's also a towel, So I feel the same about writing stories, that the functions of story writing in my life, there are many. It's like it can stop me from being angry or obsessive. It can help me kind of take a road that wasn't taken in life. It can kind of let's say, walk me through a moral dilemma. It can do all those functions. So I think that for me, there is something in the way that I deal with stories is not like, I don't know, like, let's say a sculptor saying, I'm going to make this work of art, but more like somebody who keeps dreaming and keeps kind of writing down his dreams and dealing with his dreams as some kind of an inner process. And a side effect of that is that people like to listen to him when he talks about his dreams. But I never felt that basically that I'm giving the public a service. I make stories the way that people make chairs. It's a little bit like, I think in Kafka, he has the story, The Hunger Artist, about a person who basically cannot eat for a very long time, and everybody comes to see his show of not eating. And basically, at the end, the man says, yeah, I can't eat. What can I do? People come and look at me. I'm not doing a show. I'm living my life, and my life kind of draws some interest.
Interesting. So you mean that for you, the meaning of the stories perhaps is obvious once it is already written. So you figured it out on the go?
So I can say I write practically every day, but writing could be, I'm in a park and I drink a coffee, and then I see a bird, and I see a cat walking toward that bird. So I write myself a short poem, and I read the poem, and I get up and I go shoo to the cat, and I don't let him eat the bird, because there is something in this artistic process that kind of clarifies. It's as if, like, I see the word, and then I say to my director of photography, put the right lens. What should be in focus? What kind of world do we live in? And I think that in a way that there is something in storytelling that it's a little bit like a crouch, that I need this extra stage to connect between my emotions and the word. It's a little bit like if you fly to another country and your laptop doesn't go into the socket, and you need to have this kind of transformer, alternator, I don't know what they call it. So for me, stories, it's that. You have the word, you have me. If I write a story and you get it on one end and I feel it on the other end, there will be electricity going. I'll be part of life. I won't be a misfit or somebody that should be put in a mentally ill asylum.
Let's dive a little bit, dear Etgar Keret, into Israeliness, because my dear friend Paul, in the translation, in the prologue, of the anthology Laszewicki Zaloma. Paul, what's the original name of Laszewicki Zaloma?
Well, we made that name up because it's an anthology. So
you made
just call it the Ages of
Man.
Man.
It's one of the more creative ideas that that I had the pleasure to collaborate with.
Thank you.
So at the beginning, Paul writes that your style is a gateway into Israeli character for foreign readers. When you read that, what do you recognize in it? Do you agree with that, actually? Like, I had the chance of reading you both in the same stories in Hebrew and Catalan, and it's challenging. Like, it was challenging, of course, for Paul, I can imagine. But what's your stance on that? Do you recognize yourself as someone bringing this Israeliness to the outside world?
So I must say that, I'm like, I'm an old guy. I'll be 60 next year. And I've been through quite a few wars and very extreme situation. But what happened to Israel or the Israeli society in the last 4 years is something that is unprecedented. So I'm saying, so I can't kind of put myself outside of time and talk about Israelness, because what I saw as Israelness 5 years ago and what I see as Israeliness now may be different. But what I do want to say is that there was something in the 7th of October and in the Gaza war that made me understand better the relationship between my stories and the society that I live in. You know, it's really like, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, why do you write? What do you want? Then I think that my vision would be of some, like, thinking about me getting an award, or, you know, or selling a 10th edition of a book, or something like this kind of ideas of success. But in the bottom line, that there was something in the 7th of October experience that it was as if, like, before that, writing was like being this experimental biologist learning the human body. And the moment that the war started, I felt I was a paramedic. People were bleeding. Everything was in my face. So I think that the story that sits in my mind the most in the connection between Israeliness and my style is that I think it was maybe 6 months after the war started, or a few months, I don't know exactly, but that I went to this. I told that in another interview, so I may be repeating myself. I apologize, but I went to this to give a voluntary lecture at some place, and the way outside was through a bar. So I went through that bar, and I was shocked when I entered the bar, because it was a time, you know, after the 7th of October, you know, more than 1,000 civilians dying in Israel, bombing in Gaza, soldiers dying, tens of thousands of civilians dying in Gaza, the whole world in turmoil. But when I went into this bar, it's like I was in New York in the 70s. People dancing, beautiful guys and girls, like nothing, you know? And I admit I was kind of shocked, and I just wanted to go out. And just as I was about to go out, a guy that is kind of like the barman, who was really tall, and he wore this vest with no shirt, and he looked very good looking with an earring and stuff. He put a hand on me. He says, "Etgar Keret," and I said, "Yes." He said, do you have a moment to speak with me?" And I said, "Sure." And this guy, this really hip, cool guy, is going out with me outside, and he says to me, "Listen, I just got back from Gaza 2 weeks ago. I was there for a long time." And he said, and when we went there, somehow we went through a house or something, and I found one of your books. And he said, and every night when everybody would go to sleep, I would read one story, and I would say to myself, remember that. Remember how this feels like, because this is how you used to be, and this is how you're going to be again one day. So you have to remember so you won't forget. And I think that there was something in this moment that kind of built for me some kind of a new purpose in writing. That it's as if, like, there was something in the writing that it should be some kind of a beacon of humanity. Not humanity as it's being marketed in social media, like I'm human because you kill whales, so I'll shame you, you know? But humanity in this kind of idea of being kind of confused in front of life, of seeking something and not finding it, of stuttering, you know? So I feel that, you know, that there is something in Israel right now. We have a prime minister who I strongly oppose, that keeps saying that we are like Sparta. You know, we should be strong, we should kill our enemies, all this stuff. And, you know, and basically I think that for me, the Jewish idea is the opposite of Sparta. You know, Jews throughout the centuries created societies that the leaders were always spiritual leaders, writers, thinkers. You know, they were able to transcend in a diaspora all kinds of nationalistic ideas. They have something very obscure and vague about their identity. You know, all those kind of things, they are the exact opposite of Sparta, you know. And I feel that right now, both, like, you know, the post-trauma of the 7th of October, the fact that we have a terrible fascist government, this kind of esteem things that we are trapped in, it's almost like when you see those sci-fi movies or spy movies when they brainwash somebody. And I walk in the streets and I look at the people and I say to myself, wake up, you know, wake up. This is not how we think. This is not how we process things. So I'm saying, so in a time like this, it's very, very difficult for me to represent anything because, yeah, I represent an idea of Israeliness. But this idea is kind of, it's a tiny flame, a candle in the wind, trying to fight another idea of Israeliness, like the Ben-Gvir idea of Israeliness, a messianic, violent, vengeful idea of Israeliness. So in the past, I could claim, I could say, yeah, we're going there. Right now, I'm just kind of trying to keep something, some old flame alive in a time where everything is trying to smoother it down.
Interesting. Sorry, after two things.
Two
things. One, it just reminded me of an exchange between Israeli writers. Well, they weren't Israeli at the time, but Hebrew writers Avram Shlonsky and Leah Goldberg in the year 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. Shlonsky and Goldberg had a written exchange where
I think it was Alterman, but it may have been Shlonsky.
I remember it being Shlonsky, but one of them.
You're the guy with the glasses. You're probably.
What was I going to say? So basically, Shlonsky advocated for, you know, in this time of war, what we have to do is not write poetry, but, you know, be supportive of our country, of our people, write patriotic songs and so on. And Goldberg said, no, on the contrary, she said, during times of war and suffering, we need to exalt those feelings that perhaps seem hopeless and vain, such as love, such as beauty. And she wrote poems that, like you said, aimed to remind people of what humanity is in the midst of, what would go on to become one of the worst periods of the 20th century. I just wanted to mention that because what you said reminded me of it, and it's nice to create.
No, it's very relevant. Actually, I even wrote about this exchange once. You know, so really. But I think that what's interesting in this exchange is that it's basically an argument about the function of art in our life. And I think that, you know, that many people think that in times of war, artists should write patriotic songs. But I actually think that we live in an age, you know, that if you look at social media, if you look at boycotting of writers, you know, because of nationality, because of gender, because of whatever, then you really, really feel that the world right now doesn't think like Leah Goldberg. I want to say that the things that frustrates me the most when I look at what's going on with art is that I feel that the role of art has been demuted, taken down. Basically, it's as if, like, as a writer, I feel that I used to be a duke riding a horse, and now I feel like I'm in the lowest casta. And I can explain that easily because, you know, let's say when I see a lot of people talking about boycotting artists, for example, I saw boycotting Woody Allen or boycotting somebody else, then one of the main arguments that they have is that they say, if I see this person's movie or stand-up, I'm giving that person money. And I don't want to give that person money, so I go and see somebody else's stand-up. And the conclusion of this kind of line of argument is saying that basically art is like anything else that they sell,
like a product.
I'm only buying I'm having coffee at the nice cafe where they talk nicely to me, you know, and that's something that really puts money above art, because if I will not give you my money, then I'm saying in this transaction I'm the one who gives more. While me, as somebody who grew up on Ezra Pound, Celine, and T.S. Eliot, and all those three inspired me, even though all those three were anti-Semite, I always felt that I'm screwing the system. I'm reading Celine for €8, and this guy opens my mind, and I'm going to screw this anti-Semite because I'm going to take all this wisdom with me, you know? So, so what I feel right now is that, for example, I wrote about it, that, for example, people can boycott you if you're a writer or a filmmaker for anything that you say. But if you own a social media platform, let's say if you're Elon Musk, you know, then would people boycott Twitter the same way that they would boycott a writer? And they say, oh, because Elon is such a misogyn, I will not tweet anymore? No. Why? Because Twitter is important, but art isn't. We can easily boycott artists and feel important just because art is not useful. It's like the mascot of the football game. You know, we can kick the mascot of the other team and then feel that we ventilated our anger and took part in this huge metaphor. But practically, you know, it's really, it had lost its value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You wanted to add something else, Paul?
Yeah. I did. On the note of brainwashing, because you mentioned seeing Israelis on the street lately and feeling like the country has changed. Many people outside and inside Israel say that this current government is an anomaly, that it's not representative, and that when it leaves, everything will somehow return to the way it used to be. What have these years taught you about Israeli society that you didn't see before? And even if this government were to go in the elections, if they happen this year, what do you think is going to change, or what do you think is going to stay?
So the strange thing for me is that, you know, that after the 7th of October, there are many things that I saw differently. I learned things that I was not unaware of and stuff. But somehow the conclusions that I took from it were different from the conclusions that many of my friends who were liberals took from it. Because for me, in a sense, there was nothing deeply surprising about the 7th of October. Because when I look at this information, I knew that Hamas was a terrorist organization. I knew that whenever they made an attack, they tried to kill as many people. I knew that they were trying to make greater and greater attacks. So when I saw what Hamas did in the 7th of October, I didn't say they showed the true face. They're a terrorist organization. You know, it's like discovering that ISIS are not nice. You know, they're crazy. So there was this huge trauma, you know, having a friend, somebody that I knew being kidnapped to Gaza and then being murdered there, knowing people, you know, having my brother's ex-wife calling and saying that her family are under tables and people are shooting at the windows. You know, it was a shock. But when I came back to it, basically the idea that I had that you can't occupy people for a very long time without this exploding, and that there is a need to find a solution, and that the Hamas is not a partner, which Netanyahu always said that Hamas is a partner. And I said, you know, all the time we should speak with the PLO. We should speak with people who are not messianic. But for the right-wing government, speaking with people who are not religious from the Palestinian world is dangerous, because with them you can actually reach an agreement. So I'm saying that after the 7th of October, my word didn't shake. I didn't discover the true face of anyone. I knew before that the terrorists are crazy, settlers are crazy. I know a lot of Palestinians that are not crazy. I know many Israelis that are not crazy, you know. And I thought that before the 7th of October, and I think that now, only right now, Israel as a country has 30% of the population suffering from post-traumatic disorder. So maybe now we are crazy.
Mm-hmm. There's regarding this topic, for example, we had and now that we are discussing, we are a podcast connecting Israel and Spain. We had this issue last week with the flotilla coming there full of Spanish and Italian activists and this Ben-Gvir show. And actually in our last chapter with Paul, we discussed if actually Ben-Gvir is actually the current face of Israel, because after that happened, even members of the own, even Netanyahu himself rushed like to condemn in English on Twitter like this behavior, without of course acknowledging that Ben-Gvir is a product of himself, right? So, and there was a huge debate among Israeli diplomacy. Even a lot of Jewish communities here in the diaspora rushed like to condemn, to try to show that that's not our true face, blah blah blah. So what's your stance when you see these things which actually happen as routine, right?
Yeah, so I'm saying 4 years ago, before the election, Netanyahu said that Ben-Gvir will not be a minister in his government. You know, that's what he said. The reason he said that was because this guy was prosecuted for terrorist Jewish action, because this guy is problematic and, you know, and he's a racist and does all those kind of things. Now, I'm saying that the idea to say, oh my God, we have a crazy racist minister of police, when you're the prime minister, if he's doing anything wrong, why don't you fire him? You know, so I think that the Netanyahu strategy is always kind of sending the people around him to check the water, you know, and if things slide, then it becomes the government policy. So let's say if the flotilla would slide, you know, and believe me, there are some people in this government that are crazy enough to think that, you know, that abusing people and that, you know, and making videos in which you humiliate people that are in your custody, it's something that is going to slide, you know, then I'm saying, if you come from this kind of conception, and then you're suddenly surprised, you know, why is the word not understanding that our minister is not really our minister, he's just this guy that was crazy. Now, I'm saying, as an Israeli, I talked to many journalists after the 7th of October, in the first few months. Almost all of them talked to me about a minister called Amichai Eliyahu. Now, if you stop people in Israel and ask them, do you know a guy Amichai Eliyahu? Nobody knows him, but in the words they know him. You know why? Because Amichai Eliyahu suggested to throw a nuclear bomb on Gaza and explained that Palestinian babies should die. Now, when I go to people and I say, oh, this guy, nobody knows him, they say to me, my friend, he's a minister in the government, which means that the majority of the democratic society elected this guy who wants to throw a nuclear bomb on babies. So I'm saying it's a little bit like, you know, when you live in the US, you know, maybe it's easy to say, Trump is crazy, he's not my president. When you live in Israel, you know, when they shoot missiles at you, and when you throw bombs, and when almost 2 million people in this region now are homeless because of you, then, you know, you can't go with this answer. You really need to be responsible for your actions.
Mm-hmm. What do you think people abroad most misunderstand about Israel?
First of all, you know, I'm sadly, I think that many times people don't misunderstand. They understand. I actually think that many times the Israeli misunderstand what's going on with Israel.
Sure.
But I can say that really my strongest feeling living in this world, again, being the old guy I am, is as if like I'm in a zombie movie. It's like a Last of Us or something like that. Because in a sense, both in the Israeli society and in the world, I see people who are reacting to codes, and people who basically forsake the traditional human interaction and human story. You know, I feel that really, if you think about most of the, let's say, social activities we take, most of our interaction with news, it's about anger, frustration, violence, punishing people, boycotting people, blocking people, cursing people. It's all about that. It's really, and I'm saying this is not only our political activism, this had become our cultural pastime. So the idea is that every morning we go to the Facebook town square and we pick a stone and we say, Paul, so who are we throwing it at? And While doing that, we're saying we're improving the word, So I'm saying there is something about this that I don't think that any person who's intelligent, looking at the life we're living from a satellite, could advocate for it. I'm saying, I don't know, does either of you have Instagram? Do you have Instagram?
Mhm.
Yes.
Why the hell, like two nice, intelligent people like you, okay, when they have free time and they want to experience some content, why would they outsource the choice of that content to something that claims that knows you better? When my mom used to say to me, go and see this movie, I know you love it, I would say, Mom, I'm choosing my own movies. Why does this kind of, I don't know, Apple piece of shit is there to tell me you really want to see this little kitten playing with a dog? I don't want to see this kitten. I don't want to see 30-second clips. I want to understand something through the things I watch. While this is really like kind of taking an Advil for my soul, So I'm saying this is a very, very wide phenomenon. And when I see how people treat Israel, I don't say, oh my God, I'm offended, they're so not nice to me. I say, oh my God, the world had turned crazy. I reacted to this, for example, in the Russian-Ukraine war. I talked a lot about this kind of psychotic craziness of billions around the world supporting Ukraine, putting their flags on a Facebook thing, saying, oh, we with Ukraine. And I say, hey guys, you're not doing anything. The girl that is being bombed, she's still being bombed, And I'm saying we live in this stupid world where usually most of the actions we are asked to do in our cause works against us. Look at Europe, for example. When after the 7th of October, there was a huge, huge, huge wave of anti-Israeli demonstrations. Okay, there were many people, a lot of them Muslims, others just liberals, living in various places in Europe, saying we want to change the situation. So they demonstrated against the Gaza war. Guess what? It didn't affect the Gaza war in any way. Guess what? It helped Islamophobic bodies get into power. And after those demonstrations, today it's more difficult to be a Muslim in Europe. So basically, all those people who wanted to stop a war just screwed themselves, And by the way, this is what most people do. What does Ben-Gvir do? Ben-Gvir is a fascist. He wants to kill all the Palestinians and Arabs. And what does he do when he tortures people in the Futira? He makes the world aware that there are fascists in Israel. So it makes it more difficult for him to kill other Palestinians. So basically, we live in kind of a crazy world in which we declare who we are and do stuff that either has nothing to do with what we declare or works against us. And I'm saying, like, it's like I'm waiting for somebody to go like this and that we wake up.
I want to dive into one thing that you mentioned in a few answers before. You referred to the current Israeli government as a fascist government. Actually, you said it twice, which is a kind of hard accusation. Me and Paul, we struggle every week when we discuss internal topics about Israeli politics and society. We were from long time ago like raising the boys against the authoritarian road that this government is leading to, but towards the outside world, it's kind of not easy to explain why actually this is happening. I mean, I want to go deeper, far from the, okay, Netanyahu is a fascist. Okay, you don't like Netanyahu. We also don't like Netanyahu. That's obvious. But
no,
why?
Netanyahu is not the problem. It's the face of the problem.
But why you actually consider that you are living under a fascist government, and if you feel somehow that the freedom that you had during these last years, especially you've been really critical towards the government and the war in Gaza and so on, do you think that you will be able to still be as free as you are to write what you want and say what you want in your country?
First of all, I already don't feel free, to express my ideas in that sense that the fact that I write every week in an English-speaking a Substack newsletter kind of says that, you know, that I live in a world where I feel less confident that I can publish my work in magazines or in newspaper and stuff. Now, I'm saying in Israel, it's not the case. I can publish things somewhere, but I can say that as somebody who in the past used to resonate ideas, that actually I would write a piece or give an interview and I feel that it affects something in the world. Today, it's basically, you know, everything is marginalized. And basically, I can tell you, for example, that one of the three of us, you know, if we want to be, let's say, in a lead spot in a popular portal, it doesn't matter. I wrote books, okay? Paul translates books. I don't know you well, Offer, but you do podcasts, you know? I can say that for us to become very famous, it has nothing to do with what we're doing. It has to do with what we say. If you want, Offer, I'll send you in a chat a sentence that if you say it, you're going to be very famous. You know, I'm saying, like, maybe something that would talk about anti-Semitism, European disease going through the generation, maybe something to say that maybe the Israeli country was a mistake and it should be cancelled, maybe saying the Jews are actually aliens. If you say that, you'll be famous, okay? If somebody famous will say something normal that makes sense, nobody's going to hear it. So I'm saying it's such an idiotic game, because when I go now to the media, then the media say, we don't care who you are, we don't care what ideas you have, but what you say, will it be extreme enough so we speak about it? You know, so in the end, when Ben-Gvir has a birthday and he wants the noose of a hanging rope to be put on his birthday because he wants to give a death penalty that is strictly for Arabs but not for Jews, you know, then why does he do this cake with the noose? Because this is the thing that will make us speak about him. Mm-hmm. If he would try to share an idea, we would be blind to this idea. So I'm saying there is this thing that I feel that my role in society had changed, because people say to me, we will still listen to you, but only if you will be superficial, extreme, violent, provocative. We will listen to that. We're not really interested in what you have to say.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying the discourse basically has become a lot more flat, standardized. Don't you find it hard to like what do you hope will happen when you speak to the media in this way? I mean, you've been critical of the government for a long time, and it's apparent that in your interviews you make a point of putting out this message. What are you hoping for? And do you think it's even possible to achieve that in the current environment that you describe, where it sounds like perhaps the spaces that are more open to hearing your message as it is are going to be sidelined and end up forming this, you know, minority echo chamber? I mean, and more to the point, I mean, if the only language that works in the mainstream and the mass media is this language of hyperbole, of grotesquerie, of visual provocation, what good is language anymore? I mean, how are we meant to know what's true? I'm thinking of during the Iran war, when President Donald Trump was threatening with wiping out an entire civilization. Turned out to mean nothing much, the same as usual. Nothing. So what are words anymore? How do we communicate?
So this is the problem, because I think that the idea is that life of a person or a nation, it was used to be a story. You know, we would tell ourselves a story that starts at a point, and there are fears and there are yearnings, and there are, if it's a collective, there are arguments, but we're always trying to pursue this story. And my feeling right now is that the world had lost its story, you know, because when you look at somebody like Trump, that he says we're gonna destroys civilization. No, they're actually nice. I want to do an agreement with them. I'm going to do a Riviera in Gaza. I'm going to open the gates of hell in Gaza. So the idea is that if you see a movie, and in this movie, Brad Pitt says, listen, guys, I'm going to kill the president of the US. And in the next scene, he would say, no, actually, I'm going to buy Greenland. And in the next scene, he say, I'm going to kidnap this guy from Venezuela. You'd say, this is a very bad script because things don't accumulate. And I feel that today, the world had lost its story, countries had lost their stories, and us as individual human beings, we are losing our story because basically the story is, that we're going to end the podcast and each of us is going to go somewhere. Okay, the three of us will go to a street and, and I'll go to a street and I'll see somebody passing epileptic attack and I wouldn't know what to do. And this lady would say, don't touch him, and Paul will ride on his bicycle and the chain will fall, but this nice woman will help him put it back, and Offer would hit on a girl in a bus stop and she would say to him, what do you think? It's the 20th century, start behaving. Now I'm saying those three things, they are our lives. But when we'll meet together, we will talk about Bibi, we will talk about Trump, we will talk about all those things that we can't actually affect and that only fill us with bitterness and the feeling of powerlessness. So I'm saying that the way we live our life right now feels to me very much like any addiction. Let's say you're a drug abuser, you're doing something that screws your life, you try to not to think about it, you try to tell yourself different stories, you say, oh, the fact that I go every 10 minutes on my phone, it's because I want to be updated. I'll tell you a secret. I give interviews, to major newspapers talking about politics and the situation in Israel. I check my phone for news usually once or twice a day. And when I do it, I never do it over 15 minutes. And you can ask me about anything that happened in the Middle East in the past few years, and I guarantee that I give better answers than many experts. Because the idea is that I don't watch a video of a besieged soldier being exploded. I don't read the sad story of any mother who had lost her child. I don't do that because in this world, I don't want the news to make me feel. I want the news to give me some kind of pattern information. And this woman with epilepsy, this girl that Offer is hitting on, this person that helped you fix your bike, this is where I feel.
Yeah, and in that sense, listening, for example, is really ready in the morning. It's so depressing. Like I tried sometimes to do it in order to try to understand what's happening, and then I turn it off because they start with all these sad stories about the mother who lost the soldier, and it's so depressing and it's so annoying. And but that's a personal reflection.
Offer, if you want for your audience, I can tell you in 60 seconds what happened in the Middle East in the 4 years. And beyond those 60 seconds, most of the thing, people in Israel, they watch current affair 10 hours a day.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's really like you open the TV and people say, what if Trump decides to come to the meeting with a hat and he will not take off his hat? And the guy from Iran will say, he's not coming. He doesn't have a hat. What do you want? So in the bottom line, we've been going in circles. How many items did we have about Iran since the ceasefire? We had Trump as an admiral and Trump as a pirate and Trump as a superhero and Trump as a giant cat. But in the bottom line, update, nothing happened. Nothing happened, hours and hours of interviews and bulleting and sentences and tweets, but nothing happened. And I'm saying as long as we won't be able to differentiate between our personal, real world, our real world, sadly, it's not about global warming and it's not about war in Ukraine. It's about the fact that we don't remember to feed our dog. and that it looks very skinny and doesn't come for us to pet him. This is our life, you know. So what I think is that we have this huge greed of life, and basically when I grew up 70s, 80s, 90s of the last century, we jump and we want to get as high as we can in this structure. We want to climb this building. But I'm saying right now, this building only gives you crap. You know, it electrocutes you, it frustrates you, it makes you feel that the world is bad. So I'm saying the best you can do is to let go.
Oh.
And if in the past I wanted to reach the top and light a fire, now I say I light a little fire down there, and if you two guys come on your board, we'll eat marshmallows together.
I see what you're saying, and yet at the same time, you are living in like maybe one of the craziest countries in the world. So,
Sure.
what I mean is, I mean, we both Oprah and I have lived in Israel. We know what the atmosphere is like on the street. Personal life feels somehow inextricably tied to the national story of the country. And it's most obvious perhaps in the military service. I mean, your son, I'm guessing, must be in military service age right now.
Yeah.
So when you talk about like returning, you know, from these hashtags down to our lived moments, I mean, in your case, for example, your family life has your son serving right now. How does that feel?
So I can say, you know, in Israel, army service is compulsory. I served in the army for 30 years. I was in reserve duty for 20 more, you know. And basically, I can say that, you know, I'm asthmatic, and what I did was had to do more with computer and army underwears and taking down foreign leaders. But the idea is that when I grew up, the thought about serving in the army was almost a default thought. You know, I was, as a soldier, I could demonstrate for the peace process and against the government as a soldier, you know, when I was on a leave. But at the same time, I understood the necessity of the army, you know, for the survival of the country and stuff like that, you know. Now, I'm saying at that time, maybe I was naive enough, or maybe the reality was different, that I said, I look at the guy on top, and the prime minister. He's not my prime minister. I don't like him. But I think that there is some basic morality, some basic ethics stand, some responsibility for the people he votes for, some fear of God for not doing things that are horrible, you know, that is going to be put into place. Now, I want to say that, you know, that if I would be 18 today and would have to be drafted to the army in this current situation, honestly, I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I would do because I'm saying that there is something in this that is not transparent. I want to say during the war, I signed a petition of many artists, basically calling soldiers, people like my son, saying, look around you, you know, you're good people. We want good things. But in the way, you know, people are telling you to do sometimes things that are war crimes, you know, and I know it. I've been to the army. I know it. And when I signed this petition, immediately there are municipalities in Israel, including Beersheba, the place where I've been teaching for more than 20 years, that boycotted me, said, this guy can't speak in our city. You know, there was a TV channel that said, don't read this guy's book, you know. So I'm saying that any complex stone that is being presented, you know, is something that already kind of puts you outside of any camp, you know. I could give this interview with an Israeli flag and say, we are right, the word is anti-Semitic, and I would lose a lot of the people and win some. I could say, you know, we are horrible people, throw a bomb on Israel, I hate myself, you know, and I would win others. But the moment that I say, hey, people, it's complicated, I'm achieving this beautiful wonder of being boycotted both in Israel and in Europe, you know, at the same time for opposite reasons. And I'm saying that this says two things, that A, that I'm a pain in the ass and I'm not doing what people are telling me. And B, that the world has become a little bit more stupid.
That's definitely a certificate, a guarantee of AlHayam. If you're boycotted in Israel and also abroad, you are one of us. So we are more than welcome and glad to have you here. Unfortunately, we need to finish this conversation. I think that me and Paul can stay for hours just talking with you about these topics. It's been really a pleasure. Maybe, Paul, you want to add something just to finish, because we will need to quit, but just to say goodbye to Etgar.
Yeah, Paul, Offer has to meet this girl, hit on this girl in the bus stop.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
I need to rush with my car and hit someone on the road to please Etgar's vision towards my life.
Sure, now you've got an excuse then. I mean, no, it's been an absolute pleasure, Etgar, to meet you in person. I say you were the first Israeli author I read when I moved there. Your book was thrust into my hands by my flatmates, saying if you're going to live in Israel, you must read Etgar Keret. And this feels like coming full circle. I mean, through learning Hebrew, translating you, and now having you here on our beloved podcast with my friend Ofer, it's honestly beautiful closure to a long journey, and hopefully one that will continue. And yet, may we not lose our minds along the way, because it is a difficult path that we walk. So yeah, let us hope for some sort of tikkun chevrati or olami. Like, I mean,
amen.
Who knows?
No, but I'm saying that I feel that 20 years ago, being a writer felt like a bourgeoisie kind of profession. And right now I feel that writers and translators, we are both kind of a collaborator in some kind of underground. The fact that we're doing something that doesn't interest a lot of people and somehow pisses off more people than actually would be introduced to our stuff really means that we became dissident. And I'm saying it's a pleasure to have you in my gang.
Okay. So, en català, Paul, per acabar, agrair a l'Etgar pel seu temps i les seves idees i la seva xispa i per tot, per ser aquí amb nosaltres. I com sempre, recordar-vos que si us agrada el que fem i ho trobeu important, us podeu subscriure al nostre Patreon a partir de 5 euros al mes, que no us arriba ni per una cervesa a Tel Aviv, però bé. Dit això, ens veiem, ens escoltem la setmana vinent, i Shabbat Shalom, i תודה רבה, Etgar, תודה רבה.
תודה, להתראות.
Bye bye, thank you, להתראות.
להתראות, פול.